Hey everybody, it's Jonathan and welcome back to another episode of Damaged Darts. If you like what you see on this channel, just click the icon in the lower right hand corner and subscribe. Yes, we have resurrected the Fortnite Tactical SMG into the Nerf Fortnite Tactical SMG. This is part one of a three-part series in converting a Nerf Strife into this. Alright everybody, we got all the internals out of this Strife and we've got it butterflied and ready to go. I have it marked off here with tape because I'm going to be using this miter box here and miter saw. You can get those at any hardware store. I'll put a link in the description to where you can get those on Amazon as well. I'm going to be using those making cuts here. I might even use my Dremel here just to cut off. So I marked it with tape. I'm going to be cutting this piece off here and here on both ends of the clamshell to make room for this. I've got a 1.5 diameter PVC pipe. This especially I'm going to be cutting with a miter saw to get a nice even cut. That's going to be that big vented barrel in the front of the SMG. So but I'm going to need to, you know, hack this off, remove that, and I'm not going to be using that whole barrel system in the front. Took that out. It's just going to be this PVC. I'm going to be modifying it with some 3D printed parts that I'll be creating on this project as well, and then inserting this barrel here on the front end. So that's what we're going to do next. Alright everybody, now I'm going to be starting the prep on the barrel extension, the vented barrel extension. So I've got some PVC pipe, 1.5 inch diameter PVC, I believe it is schedule 40. It's the thicker stuff. I believe they got water pipe that's thinner walled than this, but I had this on hand. Instead of going into the hardware store and buying another one, I'm just going to use this. I've got a miter box. And I'm going to place this in so I can get an even cut. You can also get a PVC cutter. They're more expensive. I'm kind of trying to do a budget build on this. So I got the miter box. They're like, I don't know, somewhere between $5 and $8. Pretty cheap. So it's a really handy tool. Cheap tool, handy tool to have. You can just buy the miter box if you have the saw. I got the combo pack with the saw and box here. So, and I've got it marked out with some painter's tape just to make sure I've got absolute the right measurement. In fact, I'm going to flip it here just to take a look when I have it flush, because I got the 5-inch mark right there and it hits pretty much about right there. So without further ado, I'm going to get to cutting. Okay, now that I have the barrel cut out, I made a paper template, just some circles with some crosshairs, and attached it with some painter's tape to show where I need to put all of my marker drill points on the barrel to start creating the circle venting on the barrel. So I'm going to start out by using my finest drill tip. I'd probably use my 7/64 drill bit. I'm going to load it up here in my drill. And then I'm just going to line it up on each of the crosshairs here. And start drilling my holes. Then once I get all those done, I can take the paper template off. Just kind of pick at this tape here and gradually, ever so painstakingly, take off the paper template. And then I just gradually go through my 7/64 drill bit, the 1/8 inch drill bit, 9/64, the 5/32, the 3/16, the 7/32, the 1/4 inch, the 5/16, the 3/8, and the 1/2 inch to finish. Now that I got everything else drilled out, it's a little bit messy here. I've got all the pieces of plastic, all the scrap from the drill bit there, but I'm going to use my deburr tool to just get in there and clean everything out. Alright, and I got it all cleaned. That's the, there's an opening space at the bottom there that shows me where my center line is at the downward positioning of that. That'll be the bottom of the barrel. And I've 3D printed the barrel tip and then the tube insert that goes inside the barrel, and that's my worker mod tube, which basically makes up the assembly for the barrel. So I'm going to just assemble these together. It's a nice tight press fit here, so that worked out great. And then the donut, the retainer on the other end, is a really good fit for the a good press fit for the tube, and then inside of the PVC barrel as well. Get that fitted in there. Just wanted to put it together so I can kind of fit it up with the my cutout stripe here, just to see how things are going to line up. And that looks pretty darn good. Alright, so now I've got all of the components slid into place. I'm going to be marking the screw holes here to mount the entire assembly together. Just going with, starting out with my 1/8 inch drill bit. I've got some screws here from the hardware store. Some number 6 1-inch screws. Any screw will do. And I'm using my 3/32 inch drill bit here to drill those holes for all the screws. So I'm going to kind of make sure everything is in proper alignment completely, of course, before I start making my drill marks there, which is pretty important because I don't want anything out of alignment once it's all anchored in place. Get my drill set here, make sure it's all lined up. And it's basically going to go through the ring, through the cradle, and through the barrel. So all three are going to be assembled together as one. So that screw is going to go straight through all three of those components, at least at this point, while I drill it down. Alright, that went well. Go back in just to make sure here that I've got everything in alignment. That makes sure I've went through all the way through. It looks like I have all the way through into the PVC pipe there. Okay. Alright, so that did it for the first screw. Then I'm going to go ahead and put my Phillips tip in here and anchor down one of the screws. Now that I have the hole drilled out, I'm going to go ahead and thread this one through. Again, it's plastic, so it's self-tapping. I'm going to anchor this one down to line up everything and hold it in place while I drill the remainder of the holes. A little precarious here. I got to make sure, realign all the holes I just drilled because there's multiple components going together. And I continue drilling it all, little by little. I've got it through the ring, through the cradle. Just kind of eyeballing it as I go to make sure that everything is steady. Alright, so I got everything to bite there on that side. Now I'm going to make my marks on the other side. There's a spot here that's going to anchor pretty much through this ring and into the strife shell itself, but that's as far as that one's going to go, just the way things are laid out. I'm going to use my silver Sharpie and eyeball it and line everything up there. That looks pretty good. And I'll make my mark the next one. Looking at it here, this one's going to go through all the components also. So through that ring, through the cradle, into the barrel. So there, got my mark there. So we've definitely got 3 solid points of contact through all of the components, and then that small, another hole up top that's going to anchor the ring and the strife shell. So I'll use my 3/32 drill bit again and drill all the way through and all the way through the next one. So far, so good. All right. So I'm going to start out with, I've just got to kind of press fit, press start, if you will, this top screw. Looks like the top one's going to be, I'm just going to use a standard black Nerf screw and anchor that top portion with that. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and, since this one's got a nice pointed tip and it's self-tapping, I'm going to anchor everything down with this screw first. Alright, that looks decent. I'll round up my Nerf screw here. Alright. Woo! Alright. And voila! That turned out great. Alright, so now I'm going to start working on that saw blade and anchor that into that top ring. I just had some center PVC plastic that I'm using for this. You can use any kind of plastic from like a cottage cheese tub, milk jug, any will do. So now I'm using the silver Sharpie marker to just line everything up. There's a little bend curve in the back of that bar that the saw blade goes on, but not too much, just a little bit. So I've got a little extra material, so I've got to mark that off and trim that down. Clean up my line here. And I got a little bit of trimming on the front as well. So I didn't need all that material because that part's going to sit on that front arch of the cradle there and mount on top of that arch and underneath that ring. I use my Dremel with the cutting wheel to do all the trimming. Nearly there. All right. Got that end. And I used a heat gun to just heat up the material on that end and bend it up. I just got to work it through the ring here. It's got some flex to it, so I'm just going to kind of work it back and forth and just gradually slide it underneath. All right, that seemed to do the trick. There we go. So now I'm going to place these arches into the cradle and get those all measured and lined up. I want to make sure that the one end that goes underneath the ring flush with that edge, and then nice and flush with the top of that arch on the front end. So I'm going to line everything up there. Alright, so far so good. It looks pretty decent. I'm going to take my silver Sharpie marker, continue making sure I got everything centered. And then just kind of eyeballing it and make my mark. I'm attempting to get right in the center of the ring there because that's where that little bolt is going to go through and anchor that end of the saw blade with the ring. About there, looks good. Okay, so now I'm going to make my drill, actually literally drill through the ring here to get everything prepped for the bolt. And I've got, and that it is a machine bolt here. It doesn't have a pointed tip, so I got to be really gotta take my time and just really press tap this thing into the hole I drilled. Alright, so I finally got that bolt to dig in and use the ratchet to set everything in place. It is a success. Okay, so next I'm going to set the front end of the saw blade here. So now that I've got it seated well on the ring portion, that thick ring portion, I've got it centered, and then I can just use my silver Sharpie marker and mark on the center point of that saw blade mount. Then I'm going to go ahead and take the saw blade out completely. Put that off to the side and work this out. Now that I've got my center point marked, I'm going to take my drill and just drill that out for the screw on the front end. I'm just going to go ahead and use the table and just lightly drill it. Okay, there we go. I'm not drilling into the table. Alright, clean that up a bit. Alright, now that I got everything set, I've got the saw blade. I went ahead and used the Nerf screw on that front end and mounted it. Now I'm going to be working on the front sight. And I've got it all mixed, you know, just some pieces of plastic I cut up and glued together to make the sight. Hit it with the heat gun and bent out all the angles. So now I've got my 3/32 drill bit. Before I do that, I'm going to line everything up. Actually, no, I'm going to go ahead and drill out the center area on this sight for the screw to go in. Alrighty. And then I can line it up on the top end of the barrel and center it with the saw blade as my guide. Alright, that looks about right. And I'm just going to take the drill and just carefully just buzz a little bit of a hole just to mark it there. Yep, that still looks good. Just to be sure, I'm going to go ahead and take this pin, make a little mark, line everything up and make a little mark there. Okay. Actually, that didn't quite take, so I'm going to go ahead and use the a little finer tipped marker so I can really get in there and actually make the mark. There we go. Now we've got a little bit more of a visible area. Take my drill and I'm going to make sure I've got the that front end of the barrel, that 3D printed part, lined up the way I want it, because it's actually going to go through the barrel and into it. Alright, there we go. Got it drilled into the vented section and into the front end, the muzzle end of the barrel. Alright, now I'm going to take that Nerf screw and thread the hole. Just use the screw as the tap here. Make sure I really get it situated right. Such a small screw. I'm going to go ahead and tap the sight piece first. Okay, got that set. Take that out. So I'm going to tighten it down just a pinch so it exposes the tip, and I'm just going to go ahead and, with it in the sight, I'm going to go ahead and just drill it through the sight and into the barrel and thread everything together. That's It's looking pretty good. And there we go. Turn it and line it up in place. Got ourselves a nice sight. Alright, so next is the iconic back, the rear sight there, that kind of sort of piece of crowbar. Looks like it's bent, so I went ahead and made a template out of paper first, just to scale it, make sure I was pretty on scale with it, and of course to know where to bend everything. And then when I fold it out, I've got the marks on the folds there. I'm going to line it up to see how long I've got to make this piece of plastic. Again, I'm just using some center PVC. You can use any sort of plastic for it. For the sight, a tub off of a cottage cheese bucket, some other plastic bucket, any kind of plastic will do. I'm going to line everything up here. Alright, I'm just going to take my Sharpie marker here and just where the, I'll mark of course where to cut it off to length, and then each of the fold lines I'm going to just make a little tick mark on the plastic. This is basically going to give me an idea of where I'm going to be doing all of my bends on this to create that bent crowbar shape. So I'm just going to use a ruler, any kind of straight edge will do, just to make a nice line across things. And yeah, I'm kind of eyeballing it here. If you want to, you can mark both sides and make sure you've got it exact, but for this kind of Fallout apocalyptic look, it doesn't have to be. Probably better if it isn't perfect. So just drawing on my folds and the cut lines. I think I got one more right here. And we're all set. There we go. Ready for bending with the heat gun. I'm just going to hit those areas with the heat gun. I'll probably cut that off with my Dremel and go from there. Alright, so I went ahead and hit it with the heat gun, and I'm just going to get a few pieces, get it all set here, and then make my cuts on the bottom there to length, and then sand off the edges smooth. Line it all up, looks pretty good. Alright, so I'm going to take my Sharpie marker and mark out that V cutout on that rear sight. Use my Dremel wheel to cut everything out. And then do a little quick cleanup here and some sanding on the edges, and we're good to go. Alright everybody, hope you enjoyed watching part 1 of the 3-part series in converting a Nerf Strife into this Fortnite Tactical SMG. Feel free to like and comment on the video. If you haven't subscribed to our channel already, just click the double V icon below and subscribe. You'll help us create more cool content for your enjoyment and inspiration. Also click the notification bell below so you don't miss out on any of our new videos. Damaged Darts, signing off.